Hey guys, tonight we wake up in a small, sun-warmed stone house just east of Rome, where the mortar smells faintly of dust and olive oil, and the walls sigh when the morning breeze passes through the shutters. The air is quiet, except for one sound: the gentle drip, drip, drip of water onto stone. Not in panic, not in rush, but with that confident monotony that tells you your aqueduct is still doing its job. You sit up on your cot. It's a simple thing, more rope than comfort. But after 29 years of aqueduct inspection, your back has accepted its fate. You swing your legs over the side, stretch your arms, and immediately wince. Your shoulder always protests first. Your breakfast is waiting where you left it. One heel of hard bread, a bit of oil in a clay dish, and 3 olives of suspicious firmness. You chew slowly, mostly because you forgot to soak the bread last night. Across the room, your tools are already neatly stacked beside your cloak, each one familiar, slightly chipped, and well-behaved. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're already tucked in, let me know your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where this slow Roman story travels to sleep. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You rinse your face from the cistern bowl, cold and bracing, and tie your sandals with the efficiency of a man who knows he will be untying them again in 12 hours with less enthusiasm. Your satchel goes over your shoulder. Inside, 1 iron scraper, 1 bronze-tipped probe, a folded wax tablet, and a handful of almonds you tell yourself are for energy, but are really just for texture. Outside, the aqueduct looms gently in the distance, arches stretched across the horizon like ribs of a half-buried giant. You walk toward it, as you have each day since you were assigned to this district, a 2-mile stretch known more for its stubborn moss than its engineering drama. You greet a passing baker, who grunts a hello and asks if you've caught the leaky channel yet. You nod in the vague way of a civil servant who knows the leak is an illusion and the real culprit is over-irrigated grapevines. You reach the first arch. It's just as you left it. Tall, stoic, slightly cracked, but no more than usual. You note the usual trickle from the inspection port. It's clear, unbothered, hydraulically correct. You sit for a moment on a smooth stone, chewing an almond, and take in the view. The water flows above, silent and sure. You're here to make sure it stays that way. And so, your very uneventful day begins. You rise from the stone with the cautious momentum of someone who has spent too much time listening to water and not enough stretching before breakfast. Your knees pop politely. The arch above you remains unimpressed. You begin your inspection routine with what can only be described as professional optimism. You know what you're going to find. Moss. Possibly the same moss from yesterday. Possibly the same patch of moss that's been growing since your 2nd year on this job, when you were still energetic enough to believe you'd one day scrape it all away for good. You walk the length of your assigned archway, eyes tracing every stone, every joint, every puddle that isn't supposed to be there. You stop beside a trickle no wider than a toe. You prod it with your stick. It's moss. You write that down. Moss, arch 2. Persistent. Slightly smug. No immediate concern. You make a notch on your wax tablet with the stylus, not because anyone will check it, but because you've developed a personal system of moss-related hieroglyphics This one's a horizontal line with a dot. It means, again, yes, but we are not alarmed. Your sandals squish slightly as you move to the next section, not from water, but from dew and time. The sun creeps higher, warming the stones just enough to make them hiss softly when touched. You pass arch 3, still mossy. You stop and give it a ceremonial scrape with the iron edge of your tool. A few green curls fall away. You feel good, productive, a minor victory in a morning built on patience. Historians still argue whether Roman aqueduct inspectors were engineers, glorified janitors, or monks with better tan lines. You, having logged slippery algae bloom, minor annoyance, 14 days in a row, lean toward a combination of all three. You arrive at arch 4. Pause. Squint. It looks slightly different. Not alarmingly. Just the moss has shifted. The puddle below it is more oval than circular. You crouch. Tap the stone. It's solid, dry underneath. You run a finger through the moss. Still soft. Still mildly smug. You write, Moss, arch 4, repositioned itself. Possibly strategic. Watching. You move on. A farmer passes by, leading a donkey that smells like it has opinions. He nods at you. Water still flowing? You nod back. He grins. Good. Would hate to see the wine dry up. You don't tell him the aqueduct doesn't serve the vineyards directly. You've tried that conversation before. It ends in hand-waving and unsolicited grape recommendations. You make it to arch 5. Sit again. Not because you're tired. Just because this stone has the best view. You chew another almond. Right. Arch 5. Structurally bored. Flow steady. Sound of trickle. Reassuring. Above you, water continues to move. Clean, clear, and unbothered. You lean back against the warm stone and close your eyes for just a second. Just long enough for a fig to drop from a nearby tree and land, squishily, on your sandal. You write, fig incident, notable, possible omen, more likely gravity. The moss, of course, says nothing, but you feel it watching you as you gather your tools and continue your uneventful rounds beneath the arches. You pause under arch 6 to rearrange your satchel. It has developed a lean, caused by the gradual weight shift of one iron scraper, 4 half-used wax tablets, and a flat stone you picked up last week because it looked useful. It hasn't been, but you keep it. The moss here is lively. It's not doing anything new. It's just more enthusiastic than the moss you left behind. You note that. Arch 6 moss. Vibrant. Possibly rehearsing for something. No leak detected. You give it a gentle scrape, mostly symbolic. The moss parts under your tool like it's humoring you. You bow slightly in return. Professional courtesy. You sit again. Arch 7 is visible in the distance, still standing after all these years, with the posture of someone who was once repaired and would prefer not to be again. You'll get there, in time. For now, you unpack your mid-morning snack. Dried figs, a small hunk of cheese, 2 almonds, possibly from the batch you meant to throw out. You eat anyway. The cheese is waxy, the figs divine. The water above your head whispers, not loudly, just enough to remind you it's still doing its job, with or without your notebook. You write, flow above, present, sound, steady, tone, faintly smug. Then from your pouch, you pull out your toolkit's most treasured item, your bronze whistle. It has no official function, but sometimes you blow it when a goat walks on the aqueduct wall, or when a tourist asks if the water is magical, or when you need to feel like someone's listening. Today, you don't use it, but you hold it in your hand for a moment, just to remember its weight. Historians still debate whether aqueduct maintenance required active supervision or just regular confirmation that nothing had changed. You, now checking for hairline cracks in a stone that's older than the average senator's sandals, know the answer is both. Arch 7 looms. You rise, knees creaking like the hinges on a wine cellar that should have stayed closed. As you reach the midpoint between arches, you notice something. A sound. Not the usual trickle. A softer note, almost like dripping. You approach, and there it is. A puddle. Not large, not dramatic. Just a shallow oval where none should be. You crouch, touch it, smell it. Tap the stone around it with your scraper. It's water, clear. But from where? You scan the arch. No obvious crack. No visible seam. You look up. Sky's clear. No dew this late. You squint. Frown. You write. Arch 7. Puddle observed. Source unknown. Suspicious in temperament. You mark it with a stone. Draw a small circle on your wax tablet. Circle it again. Then underline it. The puddle does not respond. You stand. Step carefully over it. Move on. But you'll come back. You always do. You continue walking, but the puddle travels with you. Metaphorically, of course. It clings to your thoughts like that one drop of olive oil that always finds your tunic during lunch. You're still unsure what to make of it. A leak? A natural seepage? The tears of a moss god you accidentally offended? You arrive at Arch 8. It looks innocent. You squint up at its central stone, which is just slightly off color. You note that. Not urgent. Just beige in a way that invites speculation. You take a seat beneath it, brush out your notes, and draw a small diagram of Arch 7. Not artistic. Just enough to remember where you stood and how disappointed you felt. Then you inspect your own sandals. You've walked these arches so many times, the soles are now maps of the route. You recognize a bit of pebble near the heel, stuck there since the last equinox, possibly your most enduring companion. The sun climbs higher. The water above murmurs on, not louder, not faster, just consistent, like a civil servant doing its job with minimal paperwork. You drink from your flask. The water is lukewarm and tastes like clay. You appreciate its honesty. Then, footsteps. Software. Rhythmic. Unhurried. You glance up to see a goat. Just one. It walks directly to your puddle diagram and snorts. You blink. The goat blinks back. Then it wanders over to a pile of boundary stones and begins rubbing its horns on the edge. You sigh. Goat disrespecting ancient property lines, you note. Again. You toss a pebble gently to redirect it. It hops 2 feet to the left and resumes. You accept defeat. Historians rarely mention the goat factor in Roman infrastructure maintenance. You suspect it's a major omission. Back to Arch 8. You tap the stone with your scraper. No hollow sounds. You lean your head against it, just to listen. Nothing but heat and humming. You sit back down, scribble a note. No leak, no drama, stone at peace with itself. You decide to recheck the puddle. Back to Arch 7. You walk slowly, watching for shadows, watching the water line. The puddle's still there, slightly smaller, or maybe it evaporated from shame. You crouch again. Stick the bronze tip of your scraper into the groove beside it. There's a trickle, barely perceptible, a ghost of moisture following a seam in the mortar. You press your ear to the stone. Still nothing. You write, leaklet. More mood than movement. Observe again tomorrow. You draw a sad face next to it. The clerk will scratch that out later, but it helps. As you stand, a breeze passes. You smell bread baking from the village nearby. Lunch. You start walking toward the break site under Arch 9. It has shade, and a low stone that doesn't poke your spine when you sit. The puddle, for now, remains behind you, but not forgotten. Like an unfinished sentence, or a dropped raisin, you arrive at Arch 9 with the kind of relief that only comes after 23 years of routine and an unexpectedly philosophical puddle. The shade is excellent, just enough to cool your shoulders without encouraging contemplation of retirement. You settle onto your preferred lunch rock, which is not the flattest, but it has a comforting indent from your right hip. You unpack your meal, 1 roll of slightly squashed bread, 2 olives, firm again, but more obedient than yesterday, and a fig that looks like it's been through something. A goat ambles by. Not the same one from earlier. This one's smaller, grayer, with the expression of someone who might interrupt your lunch just to ask where you went to school. You stare at it. It stares back. You both agree, silently, not to engage. You eat. The bread is dry. The olives are saltier than expected. The fig, transcendent. You nearly write a poem about it, but decide the wax tablet is too valuable to waste on fruit sonnets. Instead, you jot. Lunch, reasonable. Fig, enlightened. Goat, judgmental, nonverbal. A breeze rustles through the arches above, making the aqueduct hum. Not loudly, just enough to remind you the water is still flowing, still above your head, still responding to gravity with a sense of dignity. You lean back, eyes half closed, and listen. Not for anything urgent, just for affirmation. The sound of trickling water, consistent and calm, has become your favorite lullaby. You once told a visiting engineer it was like marble whispering, and he laughed, then asked you to repeat it for his superior. You write, Arch 9, acoustics soothing, ideal for digestion, no visible moss expansion. Your apprentice arrives, slightly out of breath, and carrying an uneven stack of scrolls. He trips on a pebble and swears in Latin that sounds suspiciously poetic. You raise an eyebrow. He sits beside you and offers half a hard-boiled egg. You accept it. Puddle update? He asks. Still dramatic, you say. He nods. Probably seasonal. You both chew in silence. Across the courtyard, the vinegar merchant walks by, pushing a cart and humming off-key. You wave. He waves back with his elbow. I bet he thinks we make the water, your apprentice says. You shrug. Let him. Historians debate the prestige of aqueduct inspectors, whether they were elite engineers or background noise in marble reports. You suspect the truth is somewhere in between, respected, occasionally fed, but rarely remembered. You write, lunch concluded, egg shared, vinegar merchant humming again. Then you stretch, pack away your satchel, and rise. Arch 10 awaits. And maybe, just maybe, the puddle has written back. You trudge back toward Arch 7 with a belly full of olive oil and a renewed determination to decode the puddle's emotional state. The sun is higher now, casting short, judgmental shadows. Your sandals squeak slightly. Nothing dramatic, just enough to remind you they're tired too. The apprentice follows close behind, still balancing the scrolls, now with 1 extra olive in his mouth and an ink smudge on his chin. You don't mention it. He will learn. Arch 7 greets you with the same mild dampness as before. The puddle is there, unchanged. Or rather, it has changed just enough to provoke questions, but not answers. You crouch. The moss has crept closer, not in a threatening way, just enough to make you wonder if it's considering expansion. You prod gently with your stick. Water seeps slightly sideways. Your apprentice crouches beside you. Do you think it's new? You sigh. It's not old. He jots that down like you've delivered a decree from Jupiter himself. You pull your wax tablet and add, Arch 7, Midday, puddle status unresolved. Seepage, philosophical. Moss, expressive but vague. Then the records clerk appears. You didn't expect him today. He walks like someone with something to file and nowhere to file it. He carries a leather case and the air of a man who alphabetizes his spoons. You stand. He raises a scroll. Report. You gesture to the puddle, still pondering. He frowns. So, not a leak. You hesitate, then nod. Not in the conventional sense. He opens the scroll, makes a mark. Fine, he mutters, but we'll need a second opinion. You smile. From the moss. He doesn't laugh. He leaves. The apprentice snorts once, then quickly pretends it was a cough. You sit back down, tap the puddle with your stylus. It ripples slightly, not with urgency, just acknowledgement. You write, clerk unimpressed, puddle unfazed, water, as always, unconcerned. The sun shifts again. You pull out your lunch fig, yes, a second one, hidden for emergencies, and split it with the apprentice. He nods in appreciation. You think we'll ever find a real leak? You shrug. Maybe. Maybe not. You both chew quietly. The aqueduct hums above you. You lean your back against the warm stone, and for a moment, just a moment, you feel exactly in sync with the water. Not because you understand it, but because you've stopped needing to. You continue your afternoon rounds with the kind of momentum that's less walking and more gliding, with periodic concern. The apprentice lags slightly, burdened not by weight, but by wonder. He's begun asking questions like, do you think the arches dream? And what if the moss knows something we don't? You answer the first with, probably of clean feet, and the second with, then it's being very cryptic about it. Arch 11 is next, historically uneventful, consistently damp, slightly darker than its neighbors due to shade and an enthusiastic fig tree. You arrive. The tree has dropped 2 fruits since you last passed. You collect one, eat it, log the other. Fig, dropped, not a threat, mildly welcome. You check the arch. The stones are solid, the water overhead consistent, the drip from the side port politely timed. The apprentice starts sketching. He's not good, but his enthusiasm is real. You glance over. That looks like a goat. It's an arch, he says proudly. You nod. Sure, of course. The air is warm now. Cicadas begin their tiny orchestra, all high strings and no rhythm. You press your palm against the stone, warm, still pulsing with the memory of water that's long passed through. Then, something new. A rumor. A passing merchant. A woman with a basket of dried herbs and gossip mentions in passing a sluice break on the far end of the aqueduct, near the taverna, or the shrine. She's not sure which. She might also be thinking of last week. Still, protocol requires investigation. You head that way, scroll tucked under one arm, apprentice in tow. He is bouncing now, hoping perhaps for action, for drama, for a sluice behaving badly. You arrive. The sluice in question is intact. The drama, it turns out, is a combination of poor lighting and an overwatered planter nearby. You crouch, confirm, no break, no leak, just a shadow that vaguely resembles a crack if you squint and wish for relevance. You log, sluice stable, alarm unnecessary, sunlight to blame. The apprentice sighs audibly. You give him your second emergency fig. Historians often ignore these moments, the false alarms, the routine clarifications, but to you, they're the meat of the job. Not fixing, not designing, just witnessing, documenting, keeping things simple, slow, and smooth. You head back to Arch 11. The fig tree has dropped a third. You let it be. Some stories write themselves, and others, well, they just trickle. You return to Arch 12 just in time to find the vinegar merchant leaning against one of the support stones, arms crossed, face flushed from sun and unsolicited opinions. Water pressure feels low, he says, before you can greet him. You pause. The water is 30 feet above your head, enclosed in stone and moving like a well-trained goose parade. You nod slowly. How can you tell? He sniffs dramatically. Taste is different. You resist the urge to point out that he shouldn't be tasting it. Regulations, common sense, the fact that he sells vinegar, not analysis. Instead, you reply, noted. He continues. Could be sediment, could be air, could be spiritual. You jot down, merchant concern, water tastes spiritual, pressure normal, vinegar fumes possible factor. The apprentice hides his grin. You crouch at the inspection port, lift the bronze cover with a grunt, and listen. The flow sounds healthy, confident, like a conversation between rivers that don't interrupt. You tap the side of the conduit. It echoes, just enough to reassure. You close the hatch. Flow's fine, you announce. The merchant grunts. Still feels thin. He adjusts his cart and mutters something about water quality these days, then departs in a squeaky vinegar-scented cloud. You and the apprentice sit. Arch 12 is well shaded, and the breeze today carries faint notes of rosemary and wet stone. The kind of smell that invites you to breathe deeply and question nothing. You unwrap a small parcel of bread from your satchel. Still firm, still edible. You break it in half. Share it. The apprentice asks, was he always like that? You nod. Born skeptical, raised on suspicion, steeped in sourness. You both laugh, then write, Arch 12, flow consistent, public confidence, 60%, olfactory disturbance, minor. The cat from the shrine appears, strolling along the top of the arch like it owns the aqueduct. And maybe it does. You salute it. The cat blinks, continues. Historians rarely factor in the opinion of cats. You feel this is an error. Later, as the sun softens and the stones shift from hot to just firm, you rest your hand on the conduit's outer wall. Still warm, still moving. You close your eyes, not to nap, just to feel, to let the hum of water remind you why you're here. Because it's not about leaks, it's about presence. Even when the vinegar merchants aren't convinced, the afternoon wears on with the kind of determination usually reserved for bureaucrats and honeybees. You pass under Arch 13, the one with the slightly uneven keystone that leans just a fraction to the left. A lean that hasn't changed in 20 years, but still earns a daily eyebrow from the records clerk. You arrive at the maintenance festival just as the last wreath of laurel is being placed atop a barrel of ceremonial wine. The courtyard bustles, not loudly, but with the steady rhythm of mild civic pride. There are banners, there are olives, there's a man playing a flute who clearly has no interest in pitch, but compensates with volume. You've been asked to give a speech. Of course you have. You, who once explained moss growth in 5 different tones of apology, are now the chosen speaker for the annual Thanks for Keeping the Water Flowing gathering. Your apprentice hands you the scroll you prepared. You glance at it, then forget everything. You step forward to the low platform built from repurposed wine crates and raise a hand in what is hopefully a greeting and not a plea for rescue. You begin. Water, you say, is wet. There's a pause, then scattered polite nodding. You continue. It flows, through arches, past goats, around small stones, and sometimes into unexpected puddles. Someone in the back claps once. Encouraged, you lean in. And thanks to our efforts and the patient silence of Arch 7, it continues to flow. Now there is actual clapping. You finish with a bow that's too deep and results in mild back regret. After the speech, you're handed a small token, a clay tile with your name carved into it, misspelled, but with effort, and a modest cup of wine that tastes like fermented ambition. You sit on a bench, sipping slowly. The apprentice beams. You were effective. You reply, they didn't throw anything. That counts. Historians may never find transcripts of these events. If they do, they'll call them ritual acknowledgments of infrastructure maintenance. But to you, they are something better. Proof that sometimes showing up with clean sandals and a working stylus is enough. You write, festival complete, speech survived, tile, inaccurate but heartfelt. You watch the sun dip below the arches, casting long lines of gold across the stones. The water above flows on, and you, for now, flow with it. Dinner arrives in the form of lentils, as it always does. You sit beneath Arch 14 on a low wooden stool that was once part of a crate, probably meant for amphory, and now perfectly shaped to make your knees question your career choices. The lentils are warm, soft, and aggressively seasoned with cumin. Someone at the cookhouse clearly had strong opinions today. You share the bowl with your apprentice. He stirs slowly, then begins the most traditional of evening conversations. Do you think Arch 10 is misaligned? You chew, think, and answer with the most diplomatic phrase in your toolkit. It's committed to its shape. He nods like you've said something profound. You both eat in silence for a while. Then, footsteps. Another inspector. You recognize him by his walk. Confident, slightly faster than necessary, and punctuated with an occasional scroll flap. He's from the neighboring district, the one with the hill route and a rivalry no one remembers the origin of. He sits without asking, looks at your lentils, takes one, then asks, your flow rate through the central channel, steady? You pause. Answer, approximately. He nods, but slightly lazy near Arch 11. You add, just to be honest. He smirks. Could be your incline. You raise a brow. Could be your jealousy. He shrugs. You offer him the last spoonful of lentils. This, in Aqueduct terms, is peacekeeping. You pull out your tablet, draw a quick diagram of the incline, and begin debating slope tolerances over legumes. Your apprentice watches wide-eyed, possibly in awe, possibly in horror. The conversation includes whether the moss distribution skews readings, if puddles should be considered feedback, and whether fig consumption affects observational precision. You write, inspector debate, civil, lentils, overcooked, incline dispute, unresolved. Eventually, the other inspector leaves, satisfied or hungry for different arguments. You and the apprentice lean back against the stone. Stars begin to peek through the sky. The aqueduct hums above like a chorus, with no lead singer. You pat your belly and write, dinner, successful. Clouds, cooperative, arches, still standing. You don't win arguments in your line of work. You endure them, like water, like moss, like lentils. Dinner arrives in the form of lentils, as it always does. You sit beneath Arch 14 on a low wooden stool that was once part of a crate, probably meant for amphory, and now perfectly shaped to make your knees question your career choices. The lentils are warm, soft, and aggressively seasoned with cumin. Someone at the cookhouse clearly had strong opinions today. You share the bowl with your apprentice. He stirs slowly, then begins the most traditional of evening conversations. Do you think Arch 10 is misaligned? You chew, think, and answer with the most diplomatic phrase in your toolkit. It's committed to its shape. He nods like you've said something profound. You both eat in silence for a while. Then, footsteps. Another inspector. You recognize him by his walk. Confident, slightly faster than necessary, and punctuated with an occasional scroll flap. He's from the neighboring district, the one with the hill route and a rivalry no one remembers the origin of. He sits without asking, looks at your lentils, takes one, then asks, your flow rate through the central channel, steady? You pause. Answer, approximately. He nods, but slightly lazy near Arch 11, you add, just to be honest. He smirks, could be your incline. You raise a brow, could be your jealousy. He shrugs. You offer him the last spoonful of lentils. This, in Aqueduct terms, is peacekeeping. You pull out your tablet, draw a quick diagram of the incline, and begin debating slope tolerances over legumes. Your apprentice watches wide-eyed, possibly in awe, possibly in horror. The conversation includes whether the moss distribution skews readings, if puddles should be considered feedback, and whether fig consumption affects observational precision. You write, inspector debate, civil, lentils, overcooked, incline dispute, unresolved. Eventually, the other inspector leaves, satisfied or hungry for different arguments. You and the apprentice lean back against the stone. Stars begin to peek through the sky. The aqueduct hums above like a chorus, with no lead singer. You pat your belly and write, dinner, successful. Clouds, cooperative, arches, still standing. You don't win arguments in your line of work. You endure them, like water, like moss, like lentils. The storm rolls in just before dusk, slow, methodical, and with the exact sort of pacing you respect in weather. The sky darkens like it's dipping into ink, and the first drops fall with an almost theatrical pause between them, as if the clouds are clearing their throats. You don't rush. You never do. You collect your scrolls, place your tools beneath the awning of the small shelter at Arch 16, and sit cross-legged, letting the rain settle around you like a loose robe. Your apprentice joins you, soaked already, scroll tucked under one arm and his tunic sticking to his knees like ambition. He sits without speaking. Together, you listen. The water above the aqueduct's steady, trained trickle competes briefly with the rain, but then blends with it, forming a soft chorus of layered droplets, distant thunder, and the occasional slap of runoff against stone. You sip from your flask. Just water today. Fitting. You write, storm gentle but insistent. Arch 16, dry underneath. Apprentice, damp but philosophical. Your apprentice leans back, eyes on the underside of the arch. Do you think the rain is trying to join the aqueduct? You nod. It's probably submitting an application. You both smile. Historians often focus on aqueduct design, on gradient and engineering, but they rarely write about how it feels to sit beneath one in the rain, to be protected by masonry shaped by people long gone, still sheltering those still scribbling. The thunder grumbles again, closer now. You both shift slightly inward. You pass the apprentice a fig. He bites into it thoughtfully. Do you think the puddle misses us? You look toward Arch 7. I think it's just shy in public. He writes that down. You note the crack repair from yesterday remains sealed. No seepage, just a faint line of lighter plaster, like a scar that healed well. You make a note. Crack integrity, holding. Rain respected it. Moss looks jealous. The storm reaches its stride. The water falls hard for 5, maybe 10 minutes. Then, without ceremony, fades to drizzle. You both exhale. The aqueduct hums above, just louder now, refreshed. You say nothing for a while. Then, just before you rise, you add one final line. Rain, welcomed. Structure, steady. Tea would have improved the moment, and you both agree. Next storm, you'll bring the kettle. You start the next morning with your apprentice and a slightly undercooked idea. Naming all the arches. Not officially, of course. That would require a petition and a priest and 3 different seals you haven't seen since the last census. But privately, for the scrolls, for the rhythm of things. You begin with Arch 1, the reliable. Arch 2 becomes the whisperer, for the way its flow sounds faintly melodic when the wind cuts just right. Arch 3, the fig magnet. You don't explain that one to your apprentice. He'll understand when the next fig drops. By Arch 4, you're in a naming groove. You christen it the Shrugger, due to its history of very nearly leaking, but deciding against it each time. Arch 5, Old Creaky, even though it doesn't creak, yet. Your apprentice joins in, suggesting names that skew a little dramatic. The philosopher, the one that knows, Diana's favorite. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. Sounds nice, he says. You log the names on your wax tablet in small, tidy script. Unofficial arch nomenclature, strictly poetic, mildly accurate. The day passes like this walk. Name, inspect, snack, revise a name, argue over whether Arch 10 looks more like a wolf or a sleeping magistrate. You name Arch 11, the listener, because when you tap it, it gives a soft echo, a sound like it's still considering its answer. Arch 12, the debater. For that one afternoon, it hosted 3 different moss colonies competing for territory. Your apprentice insists Arch 13 be called the Lucky. You accept it with a note, subject to re-evaluation. By the end of the route, every arch has a name. Not official, but real now. Real in the way that repeated names become truth. You both sit beneath the sage, formerly Arch 14, sharing a heel of bread and a small fig, passed in quiet communion. Historians might find your list one day and dismiss it as whimsy, but to you, each name carries a memory, a moment, a tilt of stone, a rhythm in the water. You write, Arch is named, apprentice engaged, infrastructure now has character. As the sun dips low, casting long shadows through the names, your apprentice reads the list aloud, voice steady, reverent. You close your eyes. Each arch, each name, echoes back in water. Retirement begins with a plaque, not a grand one. No gold, no carved laurels. Just a modest tile set into the wall beneath the listener Arch 11. Still proud, still slightly echoey, still dry as a philosopher's humor. The plaque bears your name, spelled correctly, miraculously. It reads, in quiet flow, he served. You stare at it for a moment, then take a bite of raisin cake, because that's the second part of retirement. There's a small gathering, modest. 6 officials, your apprentice, 2 curious goats, and 1 flute player whose tune never resolves. You say nothing during the ceremony. You already had your speech years ago, the one with the fig and the puddle. The apprentice makes a few remarks. Thanks you, praises your notes, suggests you inspired confidence in moss-related discussions. You nod, sip wine, try not to weep into the cake. Later, you walk the arches one last time, not as inspector, but as witness, as guest. You pat the whisperer, adjust a stone by Old Creaky, leave a grape beside the philosopher, who seems in the mood for offerings. At the listener, you sit, Your apprentice joins you, says nothing, then quietly hands you one last wax tablet. You read, "Today, dry. Arch 11, attentive." Retired inspector passed through, still watching. You smile. Pass him your bronze scraper, not ceremonially, just a handoff. He accepts it like it matters, and it does. You walk home slower now, the arches behind you humming, the road ahead, unmarked. Your sandals are soft from years. Your scrolls are already being copied. Your name is etched on tile. You write one final note. Water flows. Records end, but the hum continues. You place the tablet in a drawer, close it, and brew tea, just as the sky begins to pink. You don't check the weather. You know it by feel now. That night, you lie on your cot one final time, not as inspector, not as recorder, but simply as someone who once walked beneath arches and listened carefully to the sound of water. The window is open. A breeze moves through the room like an old friend, finding its way back without knocking. You stare at the ceiling, remembering. The first day your sandals too new, your scroll too clean, your understanding of moss overly optimistic. The mornings under the whisperer, where the water sometimes echoed your thoughts. The debates over fig placement and puddle politics. The vinegar merchant's unsolicited critiques. The flute player's unresolved tune that somehow always felt like a kind of answer. You don't write tonight. Your tools are packed away. Your satchel has been hung on the wall, beside the stone you never found a use for, but kept anyway. You sip your tea brewed, not by protocol, but by feel, and then you hear it, the gentle trickle of the aqueduct, software steady, somewhere beyond the house, above the arches, through the stones. It's not loud, it's not trying to be, but it's still flowing, still making its way from mountain to city, from spring to basin, with the patience of stone and the memory of rain. You close your eyes and dream, not of fountains or floods or civic plaques, but of moss that returns every spring, of a puddle that never truly explained itself, of arches that never asked for applause. You dream of walking your route, one last time, but without the weight, only the rhythm. Wind down. Now, the day is done. The scrolls are silent. The arches stand quietly in the dusk, casting long shadows that don't ask for attention. The aqueduct hums, not as performance, just as continuation. You lie beneath a thin blanket, the kind used by people who trust the weather. The breeze carries the scent of water and fig and time. The stones around you, worn smooth by footsteps and sun, cradle the cool air like memory. There are no alerts, no puddles to check, no clerk to convince, only the steady hush of water through the old conduit. You breathe in, not to measure, just to rest. You breathe out, and the water flows. Through arches you named, over moss you knew by texture, through channels you once tapped with your knuckle, just to hear their song. The hum is steady, unconcerned with ceremony. It keeps going. And now, so do you. Not away, just inward, into rest, into breath. Let the water hold you. Let the stone remember. Let the arches, for once, inspect you. You've done your work. You've walked each length. You've noted the silence. Now, let sleep find you. No reports required. No corrections. Just the soft, slow sound of water flowing forever. End of script. Sweet dreams.